Mike London joins us live from his office in Charlottesville. Coach, great to have you with us. Our way too early forecast for September 20th in Provo shows no signs of a freak flash flood warning with a lightning delay. So I guess you have that going for you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And it was kind of out of the norm there when BYU came down here to Charlottesville. I mean, the weather definitely had an issue with that.
Are your fans and your team still talking about how weird that game was? You open the season, you have this huge delay, and then you play, and fans out of the stadium get back in.
Well, it is one of those games that you look at that it has different set of circumstances that happened in it. But I can tell you this, in the time that was between the game when the officials brought us up, took the teams off the field, the Coach Mendenhall, I had a chance to sit there and not only talk to him as we do pregame, but during all that, I mean, what a first-class guy he is. And, it's just, it's amazing sometimes how weather does have issues that affect games, but that was definitely one of the strangest games that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, we've heard all about the BYU side of that weather debacle, and so we wondered, what your experience was like with your team and your players in the locker room as you try and keep them engaged in a very competitive situation, but you can't go out and expend that energy.
No, and it's about your focus. It's about what you do. You never know when it's going to actually end, so you don't want to get them warmed up. You don't want to start talking about getting ready to play the game, and because of the emotions of being up and being down and all that. So it was basically a lesson in for them to keep themselves loose, to try to stay focused as much as possible. And then, when the game started, once again, it was the beginning of the game, so that whole mentality and how you get yourself ready to play was a lesson learned. So, but it's definitely one of the stranger lessons we've learned in the last few years I've been here.
Looking at how the season shook out with BYU, do you feel like you caught BYU at a good time when they were installing the offense in that first game?
Well, you can look back and you can say perhaps, but again, there's so many different elements to a game that, as far as the execution and what you do and what you don't do. I mean, for us, the punt block was big, in that game, and
yeah.
And the interception that towards the end that went through, their receiver's hands, and then you could say because it was raining or whatever, but you just have to play the game according to the conditions and the situations that you're in. And I know one thing that they went on and played really good football afterwards, and again attributed to a well-coached team and a team that has been good year in, year out. So, it's important that your first couple games that you start out well, and that was one of the games that we had an opportunity to play a really good team and come away with a win.
Mike London, head coach of the Virginia Cavaliers, with us on BYU Sports Nation. Coach, you returned 17 starters, 8 on offense, 9 on defense. Where is the specific strength on your team amidst all of those returning starters?
When you look at our team, we have guys that have played now for the second year in a row with, the coordinators being consistent. There's a secondary that I think we have a lot of good players. Highlighted by Anthony Harris, a team captain, and an All-American for us, and Eli Harold, a defensive end, rush end that has really come on. So you look at the rush guys, you look at our secondary. I believe there's going to be better play there. Our skill position, there's almost 100% of our passing game returns. We'll talk about both quarterbacks, Grayson Lambert, who was the named starter, but also David Wofford, who played in that game. Almost 100% of our rushing game returns, and that's Kevin Parks, who is I believe the ACC's leading rush returner coming back. So, there's a lot of strengths. It's more so there's young guys that have played in college games and now that are older and now have a chance to be significant for us.
You had 3 guys drafted last year, 2 on the offensive line, Morgan Moses in the 3rd round there, notable. You lose Brent Urban to the Ravens in the 4th round, but I noticed that the Gatorade Player of the Year is Andrew Brown, who will be going to Virginia. He looked like he had a good time at the ESPYs, Coach.
Yeah, he did. What an experience for a young man. You think about it. He played his high school football, and then he was a mid-year admit for us, so he started college in January and went through spring practice, and then this thing happened out there in California for the ESPYs But more than anything else, he's such a humble young man, and recognized as one of the best high school players in the country. And we're just so fortunate and blessed to have him, be a Cavalier. So like I said, he's a great young man, very humble, and the experiences that that ESPN and everyone that's involved with it, allows young student athletes to take part of is definitely a lifelong memory that's been created.
Mike London, head coach of Virginia football, with us on BYU Sports Nation. Coach, you had 3 draft picks in the NFL. What does that do for your program in terms of recruiting and moving it along?
When you look at everybody's got their mailers that they send down. Everybody talks about, you want to accentuate what you have with your program. One thing that sticks out for us, and maybe not as flashy as other things, but when you look at statistically, we're in the top 10 in the country in players that get drafted, players that have longevity in the league, and players that contribute to their teams. And so it's not, how many draft picks. I mean, that's important.
Yeah.
But when you talk about guys that are getting drafted, that are staying on teams, that are being productive, that speaks to, the entire program, since Virginia's been having opportunities at George Wells days and after, Coach Groh and even now. So it's a school that scouts like to come to because they know players, they graduate and they're educated. And I think there's a correlation of a lot of things, as you guys well know, but it is important that young men who aspire to be NFL, guys can also get a great education from a school like Virginia, and you kind of build your platform off of that.
Coach London, there's been a lot of talk this offseason with BYU and how they're perceived. The ACC and SEC made comments related to BYU. When we schedule, we're not going to consider them as a Power 5. Yesterday, Arizona's athletic director said, hey, we consider BYU a Power 5 type opponent. What do you think of BYU in the landscape of college football as a possible P5 equivalent?
Well, let me tell you, you're talking to a football coach here, and let me tell you, that's an excellent football team. I don't know all the intricacies about conferences, who's in, who's out, who should be in. But I know even from afar, when I in my Richmond days, 2008, 2009, we won a championship there. You always knew about teams that were out west or out of your geographical area, and BYU was always one of those teams. Very physical, very tough. And as a football coach, I tell you what, they're as good as any team that that plays college football out there. Then talks about being conference champions. And I can't get into the specifics as to why they're not affiliated with a conference, but I do know this: as a football team, they're an excellent football team, and they can find a home in any conference.
Coach, I know that you mentioned you have a relationship or at least a conversation with Bronco Mendenhall. How often do you have communication with him, and how has that helped this series continue?
Well, we're both in the same profession, so I have professional, relationships that occur with the American Football Coaches Association clinics, the different things that happen with whether it's a Nike Tour coaching clinic or coaching clinics in and around the country. And just the fact that we're in the same fraternity, and although we wear different colors, the responsibilities that both of us have for educating young men and being role models and mentors, we both share those same type of values and sentiments. So it's not as much as we're sending Christmas cards to each other, but it's more so that out of a respect for what he does and from afar knowing what he's done over his career. Knowing that I could say I'm very similar in terms of the importance of what you do with our student athletes and how you get them to become educated men and productive citizens once their college playing days are over.
Head coach Mike London of the Virginia Cavaliers, we appreciate the candor and the insight into your team and to what lies ahead in 2014. We wish you the best of luck, and we'll see you on September 20th, hopefully not under rain and lightning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Thanks, Coach.